Welcome into Other People's Shoes. As you know, I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get to today's episode, a little message from my friend Katie Horner. Katie, take it away.
The event of the year for Christian business owners is just around the corner. Handprint Legacy Live 2021 is virtual this year, which makes it super easy to attend from anywhere in the world without makeup, long flights, or expensive hotel rooms. Thursday through Saturday, June 24 to 26, we'll spend 3 powerful days mapping out your first or next most important steps for your business. I'm Katie Horner. My husband and I have grown from full-time ministry in Mexico to full-time international business owners by understanding and solving the countless marketing challenges faced by Christian entrepreneurs. We created the Handprint Legacy Live event as a safe haven where small business owners, teachers, authors, and coaches strategize, implement, and grow their business. This event is highly interactive and tickets are limited. Grab yours today before we sell out, because 3 days of Bible-based fun and marketing instruction is going to leave you with your next marketing funnel all mapped out. Register now for the 2021 event at handprintlegacylive.com.
That's right. If you are interested in this amazing event, please, of course, check out our show notes now. There will be more details on that there. And without further ado, Lucas, take it away.
Hey, come take a walk with me, not like you used to do. Do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction. Change your perspective.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. As you know, I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining us today. And, you know, it's not every day that you find somebody on Facebook on the videos thing. Do you guys know about these? I'm sure some of you do. You're like, yeah, we Neil. But I'm going to tell you anyway if you don't know. So I'm scrolling through Facebook the other day, and this video pops up from this place called Unscripted Saints. Or excuse me, Saints Unscripted. I got it backwards. It's the dyslexia in me. Anyway, I start watching this video on Mormonism. Now, for those of you who know me personally, you know that I probably could be a Latter-day Saint. Like, I know a lot about Mormonism. Some would say maybe more than the Bible. I don't know. We could put that to the test maybe with this next guest. Hopefully he can not whip me too bad in Mormonism trivia or Latter-day Saint Jeopardy. Who knows? I don't know, but help me welcome him in. By the way, they have a pretty big following if you want to go check them out as well as I did. 13,896 people. Now, their site may say 95, but it's 96 now because I liked them after hearing more about their videos. They have 20,326 people following them. So quite a big following on the socials, just saying. So if you want to check that out. And I'm super excited because he's sitting currently in the Provo, Utah area. And by the way, in my mind, that's like the place to be if you want to know anything about Mormonism. So help me welcome him in today. David, how are you?
I'm great, Neil. Thanks for having me on. It's a privilege to be able to support a podcast like this that kind of promotes unity and ecumenicalism, if that's even a word. So I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad you said that word. Say it one more time, please.
Ecumenicalism or unity?
That one. Ecumenical. I can't even say it. One more time. Say it one more.
Well, I'm not even sure if it's a real word, but ecumenicalism.
Well, Google says it's a real word because when we were emailing back and forth about some show details, I told my wife, I said, he used a word that I had to look up. And she said, what was the word? And I was like, and she's like, that's not a word. And I was like, no, he said it better. So
as long as it didn't have a squiggly red line under it, I think we're in safe territory.
Yeah, but I looked it up, and it does mean non-denominational, if I remember right. Something like that, right?
Yeah. But
so I think you are using it correctly. Yeah, I think you are using it correctly. In fairness. Cool. So awesome. So Utah, that's fun. I spent some time out in Utah, and we'll get to that momentarily. 2 weeks actually out in the great city of Salt Lake City. Good time, fun time. Reminded me a little bit of Southern Oregon, kind of mountainy and kind of in a valley, sort of. So it's kind of cool.
See that?
Yeah. So before we get too far down the road, I love to ask people this question just so we can kind of help with some context. So here we go. You ready for this?
Ready.
All right. What style of shoes do you like to wear? But more importantly, what size shoes do you wear?
Ooh, okay. That's a good one. So I'm a 10.5 in men's. I don't know why it's important to include the detail that that's men's size, so I feel like that should be assumed. But I've always been a big Converse guy, but they really don't provide the arch support that you need. But I feel cool wearing them. So I've got a couple Converse. That said, my favorite shoe right now is actually, they're literally just kind of we've been in quarantine for, almost a year, right? So I've been really digging the Walmart brand, just like fuzzy slippers. And I've worn those things. Actually, I didn't even buy them. I think they were my dad's and they weren't the right size or something. So I inherited them and been wearing them, since that time. And they're really beat up. They've got a hole or two, but they're comfortable. So that's all that I'm a guy. They're comfortable. They're efficient. They work. What else matters,
I've never had anybody tell me that they're wearing hand-me-down slippers, by the way. So you get the first award for that. That's funny. Like, I'm laughing. Like, I had to mute my mic because I was laughing so hard just now as you were articulating that back to us. So that's fun. The reason why I was asked that question, right, is because I feel like if we're going to be in your shoes, we kind of know what you're wearing, and I was, some people say, don't ask the shoe size. That's so invasive. I'm like, but it lets me know as a host how easy it is for me to slide into your shoes, to be in your shoes. There's a methodology behind that. And maybe I'm too spiritual, but I wear a 10.5 also, 10.5, 11.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, for me, in my mindset right now, right, getting theological perhaps for some, but the methodology for me is it at least lets me know, hey, I can fit in those shoes. I can walk where you're walking, and we can go on this journey together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, does that sound okay?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Is it too early for that?
I'm glad we had a similar size. I don't know what you'd say if I was like, oh, I'm a size 6. And you're like, okay, this interview's over. We're done.
Well, but even that, right? So let's say you were like an 8 or something like that, right? I do have a buddy that wears a smaller size than I do, and it is a men's size, for the record, for those that are wondering. But even his size, it would be tough to fit in. But at least it lets me know that, hey, this might be a tough journey that we're going to walk down together. Even like with you and I right now, this could be a tough journey. I don't know, but at least it lets me know that again, we're trying our very best to fit into what you're doing today, And so that to me is what the essence of the show is all about. And so anytime I get to kind of share the essence, I like to do that. So anyway, so we'll get started. So if I flew out to Utah, which I think from Medford, Rogue Valley International Airport, out to Salt Lake, which is where I'd probably have to land, not that far of a flight, like 2.5 hours roughly, I think. What would we go and do a day in the life of you in Provo?
Oh, in Provo. Gee whiz. Okay. You're asking a hard question because I haven't really done anything in the last year.
Well, pretend there's no COVID. How about that? Can we use our imagination for a minute? Like there's no COVID, there's no quarantine. What would we go and do?
On a scale from 1 to 10, how nerdy would you consider yourself?
Did you say how nerdy would I consider myself?
Yeah.
Well, some would probably put me on an 11.
Okay.
I'm pretty up there. Like I don't get into like Harry Potter. I mean that's probably one nerdism. I probably don't go down, but like Star Wars, Star Trek, I'm into that.
One thing we might try out if you came to Provo, there's kind of a new place. It's called Evermore. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's really a hit and miss, but what it is it's kind of they built this little town, this like medieval era town. And all of the employees there are actors and they're dressed in medieval garb and stuff. And you go there and there's a plot to what's going on in this town. And it changes depending on what season you're in the year. And you go and as a visitor there, you're a participant in this story and you talk with the characters and they send you on different quests and whatnot. And around Halloween time, it's a lot of fun because they've got, monsters and stuff. But if we were feeling risky, if we were feeling adventurous, we might give that a shot.
I honest to God want to go there right now and do that. Like, I'm serious. Like, I want to get on a plane and go do that. Right? That seems so fun to me.
Yeah, it's really a hit and miss. Like, if you're not social, if you're not extroverted, you're probably not going to have a great time there. But if you want to, get down and do some role playing. You're encouraged to wear, your own costume and stuff. If you just want to get immersed in kind of a different world, that's kind of a fun thing to do.
So my wife and I were in Vegas years ago, and we somehow got hooked up with a dinner mystery night, like 4-course, 5-course meal at this hotel, and a murder had taken place in the midst of this party. And so what we didn't know as watchers of this production, we were also cast into the role of trying to figure out who had done it. And so the guy's going around the room, wireless mic, and he comes to our table and he's picking people randomly to be in this, be extras, I guess, in the role. And so he comes to my table, and undoubtedly, like, I've never found a spotlight that didn't want me in it, if that makes sense. Right. So we talked pre-show about, your videos and your name and whatnot. But anyway, so yeah, again, spotlight always finds me. It just does. Like, I don't know. Anyway, so he comes to me. Yeah. Right. So he comes to me. He's like, hey, what's your name? What do you do? And so I made up a fake name. We all did at the table, all of us that were there. And then he's like, well, what do you do for a living? I was like, you really don't want to know. And he's like, no, I want to know. And like the crowd is chanting, tell him. I mean, it was awesome. And I finally said, yeah, I work in collections, which is true. And the whole room silent. And he takes 10 steps back from me. He was like, wow, you're almost as worse than a car salesman. So I was like, wow. Anyway, so I love things like that. I guess just to tell you that story, I love things like that. So anyway, back to you getting into your story. As I said, kind of at the onset with you and I've always been fascinated by the Mormon Church, the Mormon faith, Latter-day Saints. By the way, I don't know what to call you guys, so I might mess up on that, and hopefully there's some extra grace there on your side if I say something that maybe isn't jiving. So, okay, fair enough.
Hard to offend.
Good. Okay, let's keep that going. Okay. So here we go. So my first question that I really want to lead off with, and this is really for you personally, like why on earth did you believe in the teachings of the LDS Church and Joseph Smith? Why did you personally start to gravitate towards that?
I think that probably I think it's a loaded question, because it sounds like you're coming from a place of we've got these incredible beliefs. How could you possibly, believe that kind of thing? And I know you're not meaning to frame it that way, but I think a lot of people have that question because they've heard so many different things about what Latter-day Saints believe. And I think part of that is because we do believe some unorthodox things compared to mainstream Christianity. And I think the other reason is that, we really weren't a well-liked religion when we came about. And honestly, critics, skeptics have had, almost 200 years to cook up, rumors and misconceptions about us. And I'm not saying that I'm not trying to put everyone else in a bad light there, but there are a lot of misconceptions about our faith. Personally, I don't necessarily think that we believe many things that are much more outrageous or crazy than mainstream Christianity. I think it comes down to putting yourself in the other person's shoes, right? I mean, if you step out of your mainstream Christian shoes and you look back into that circle, you're like, whoa, we believe that Moses talked to a burning bush and that, Jesus came back from the dead, and Moses split the Red Sea. These are quote unquote crazy things, but when you're used to them, they don't seem all that crazy. When you've grown up with those beliefs, they don't seem all that crazy. Now, I did grow up as a Latter-day Saint. My parents were Latter-day Saints. My parents were Latter-day Saints. But one thing that was always emphasized, at least to me, and the experiences of members of any religion are going to vary, right? But in my case, I was always encouraged to find truth for myself, to pray about things, and to seek a spiritual witness of the truthfulness of what I was looking into. And that's been my journey. It didn't happen all at once, but there comes a point in everyone's life when you have to take a step back and think, do I believe what I believe simply because my parents taught me? Or do I actually believe these things? And you have to make that choice. You have to face that wall. And I did that. And I find myself right here still in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's something I'm very content with, and I'm excited to be here. I do believe that it is Christ's restored church. And I know that grinds the gears of a lot of people in other faiths, even though a lot of other faiths kind of believe the same thing, that they're, God's true church and whatnot. But I do believe Joseph Smith was a prophet. I do believe the Book of Mormon is true. And I would mention, I don't want to be ranting here too much, but I would also point out the word belief there. I think that in my faith, we really get hung up on an I know testimony. Like I know of a surety that this is true, but I don't necessarily think that that's what God asks of us. I don't necessarily think he expects us to know that, he is there, for instance. If he wanted us to know for a fact without any shadow of a doubt that he was there, I think he'd just appear on C-SPAN and we'd all know, right? But he doesn't. And so I think that belief is more what he's after. So I'm very comfortable in having an I believe testimony. I believe Joseph Smith was a prophet. I very firmly believe the Book of Mormon is true. I believe the Bible is true. I believe Christ is our Savior, our healer. But I haven't seen Christ. I haven't seen God. So I don't know that I would be able to say I know these things. But I'm comfortable with an I believe testimony, and I'm content with some of the ambiguity that comes along with that.
First off, I love that.
Thank
I really
you.
do. I love the fact, here's what I love about it, right? Is I love that you can stand firm and say, hey, this is who I am. And the word that you use, which I really respect, are already out of the gate, is I am confident and content. And I think that's a struggle that some people have, is being confident in who they are and really being content with who they are too. So just food for thought. So with that, I struggle with Mormon faith. I struggle with the LDS movement. Partly the reason why I struggle with it is there's so much noise. I think that's a fair statement. Noise, music, whatever you want to say, around Joseph Smith.
Right.
And I think that's been my biggest hang up. So with that, I know, and I'm trying to tread lightly here, but I know for me, the hard part is I've always looked at him, and maybe this is where my view and my perspective maybe needs to shift a little bit, is I've always viewed him as him taking advantage of people. And me being somebody who loves empathy and, is high in mercy and really doesn't want to see anybody hurt, I struggle with that because I'm like, dude hurt some people. Mm-hmm. And I don't read per se, when I read my Bible, or we'll call it the Christian Bible, lack of a better wording, I don't read Jesus doing that. And so that's my big hiccup and a hang up with Joseph Smith. So if there was somebody out there who is like me, and maybe for you, so maybe I'll flip that so it's you, because I don't like generalize, I want it for you. Mm-hmm. So for you, have you ever struggled with that, knowing that he had done some, I don't want to say wrong per se, but done some things that maybe been perceived as him hurting people?
Sure. Yeah, of course. And I don't think that it would be wrong to use the word wrong, because he did do things that were wrong. And I think one of the problems historically is maybe in my faith, we've maybe glorified the idea of what a prophet is a little bit too much. And I think that that's a normal thing that happens when, just in society, as one group pushes against another group. We see it going on with politics right now, right? Like as Democrats fight against Republicans, the Republicans become even more Republican and the Democrats become even more Democratic, And so I think that in the early history of our church, there was so much pushback against, Joseph Smith and our doctrines that we kind of backed into our corner even more than we had before. But I think we're kind of working our way through that right now as a church, where we've really come out with some great material that comes to terms with some of these things. Gospel Topics essays, the new history books called Saints, if you're familiar with those things. But yeah, everybody who is human, who is mortal, is going to do things that are wrong. So I totally agree with you. I would say that Christ, I wouldn't compare Joseph Smith to Christ, because Christ is God and Joseph Smith is a prophet, or of course, from my perspective. And I don't think that prophets are, on the same pedestal as God. And I'm probably, my fellow Latter-day Saints might be might cringe a little bit at this statement, but I really don't like a hymn that we have in our hymn book called Praise to the Man. I wish the audience could hear what.
My mind is blown right now. I'm going to jump in. My mind is blown. With that, if I can interject just briefly, there was a video I watched that the church put out. It was a documentary movie. And in that movie, just to kind of get to the end of the story, if you don't know, Joseph Smith, in the Latter-day Saints' mind, was martyred for his faith in Carthage jail. There's a whole backstory behind that. We don't want to go down that road. Sure. People can reach out to you if they want to know more about that. But for me, in that moment when he's, trying to break out of the jail and the window breaks and it all of a sudden he's shot and the pan, slows from him, goes up to heaven. And then the next thing we see is him and Hiram. That's his brother, if I got that right. So help me on that. Okay. I thought I did, but there's a statue of them. And it's this song that every time it comes on, even on Christian stations, I have to turn it because I'm like, it makes me think back to that documentary. I'm like, they're glorifying him as Jesus, putting him on the same level. And if I heard you right, you don't do that. Right?
No, I don't think you can do that. And I think a good example, I think there's precedent for that in the scripture. Now, I don't want to be bashing Joseph Smith. Again, I believe he was a prophet of God. But a prophet is different than a member of the Godhead, right? And I think that we can go to the scriptures to see examples that kind of set the precedent for that. Let's look at Judas. He was an apostle of God, really hurt some people, right? And we could look at plenty of other examples. You got Peter, right? Even Peter, he cut a guy's ear off. Like, can you imagine if Joseph Smith or our current prophet right now, President Russell M. Nelson, like if a story came out online about him cutting a guy's ear off, like physically assaulting him, like people would freak out. People would leave the church over that, and people would be offended. And of course, there would be people that would be hurt. But we don't really freak out when we read about Peter doing that because, it's in the Bible and it happened centuries ago. So it's okay. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, as Latter-day Saints, we don't hold prophets to the standard of Jesus, right? We don't expect them to be perfect. We recognize they make mistakes. And when it comes to Joseph Smith, sure, there are plenty of things that he did that I struggle with, that maybe I don't understand. But those things, at least for me, have not negated the testimony that I have of him being a prophet and being a tool. And we see Christ using tools that are far from perfect. He used tax collectors and fishermen. And I mean, Joseph Smith was a little farm boy. So I think that within the church and outside of the church, I think if there was a paradigm shift of what our expectations of a prophet are, that might help. That might help clear up some of these issues.
You mentioned that there are some things that you struggle with Joseph Smith. Is there just one in particular that kind of jumps out at you?
I think that in general, I wouldn't be the one to get into too many specifics with this, but it's no secret that there was the practice of polygamy in the early church. And I don't believe that Joseph Smith instituted that practice as a way to take advantage of women. Looking at the available evidence, I don't think that makes sense. However, I don't know the why. Like, I don't think that he was, a sexual predator, but I don't know specifically why God commanded him to do that, as happened in the Old Testament and scriptures there. But anyways, that's probably the most popular response to that question. But I also think that there are, lots of really wonderful things that Joseph Smith did. And I think that we tend to put on the blinders sometimes and look at just the controversy and just the things that maybe we disagree with, and we ignore, the wonderful things that he taught and stood for as well. But in answer to your question, that's probably what I'd say.
Gotcha. There's this guy that played football out in Denver, Colorado. Maybe you've heard of him. His name's John Elway. You heard of that guy?
I have.
Okay. So what's funny about John Elway is people remember his 2 Super Bowls back to back.
Mm-hmm.
The Broncos won back-to-back Super Bowls. They forget the other ones that he lost. And I wonder sometimes if we as people, on the flip side of that, we focus so much on the negative in life that sometimes we forget about the good things that somebody has done. So, just trying to help kind of close that kind of discussion on that. But it's up to you.
I think that makes sense. I think, honestly, that as people outside of a faith looking in, we always want to feel secure in our own beliefs, right? And sometimes what that looks like is, gobbling up whatever reasons come across to not believe in the other religion, So I think that happens sometimes when people look at our faith, and sometimes people might just look for a quick way to disbelieve it without really, reading the Book of Mormon and praying about our faith and looking at, I think there's a lot of what you mentioned, a lot of noise, and we miss a lot of the really just core, beautiful doctrines of my faith that are really some of the reasons why I firmly believe in what I believe in.
I'm wondering about this. I know most Mormons take a 2-year mission. Mm-hmm. Where did you go on yours? I'm guessing you took one.
I did, actually. It's
okay.
Not something that's required, but it's definitely, recommended and suggested for men to do that. I served in Chihuahua, Mexico.
Cool.
Yeah.
I thought it was required. I did a little mind blown. You probably maybe missed that, but I did a little I thought it was required. So that's something that actually you've already fixed too in me, as far as knowing and understanding, the LDS church is. I thought it was required. So that's good that it wasn't. Like I said, I thought it was. So with that, you went on the 2-year mission. So during that mission, or maybe even during your faith in general, because you've been following for how many years? Help me with that.
How many years have I been a member of my faith?
Yes.
Well, I was baptized when I was 8 years old. So couple decades.
Okay, a couple decades now. So during that time span, from the moment you were baptized, because that's really kind of your jumping off point, if you will, your start of it, I would imagine. Okay. I was just trying to figure out like a Genesis moment, if that makes sense. So during that time span, has there ever been a moment in your life that you personally were persecuted for your faith, for being honest?
Oh my goodness. I mean, just throw a dart at a calendar, right? Like, especially in what I've been doing with Saints Unscripted. I mean, just click any video on Saints Unscripted and then go to the comment section and see what you find. I mean, YouTube comment sections are horrible in general, but especially when you're talking about religion, and especially when you're talking about a minority religion like ours. Oh man, there's a lot of persecution. But growing up, I grew up in Oregon, so maybe if I had grown up in Utah, it might have been different. But growing up in Oregon, I was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was a minority religion, and there were other, Christian friends that would challenge me on things, or maybe they just kind of treat you a little differently. I wouldn't say necessarily bad, but there's definitely this kind of general feeling among people outside of our faith that, oh, I've heard a lot about those Latter-day Saints. They're a little crazy, And that's really unfortunate. And that's part of the purpose of our channel, is to kind of try and like show people like it's not all that crazy, but yeah, of course I've been persecuted. I'm sure everyone really has been persecuted because of their faith. Maybe Latter-day Saints a little bit more because of their minority status, but yeah, it's a pretty common thing.
I just know, like, biblical history, right? For me, first century Christians were, dipped in wax and, burned in Nero's, gardens.
Set up as living torches.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, I know that, as far as, again, Christian faith, there's been the Book of Martyrs that has come out. There's a band back in the, early 90s, 2000s that I really loved, DC Talk. They put out this, Fox's Book of Martyrs as well, Jesus Freak book. where, they highlight people who have been martyred for their faith. And so I guess what I'm trying to ask is that do you have not a story where, maybe you were, obviously you weren't killed because you're here right now, but I mean, maybe where you were threatened to the point of where you had to choose, like, am I going to believe this or not believe this? Maybe not to that extreme, but you know what I mean? Like, I mean, has there ever been a moment where somebody, more than the comments, because again, anything you do online, I was going to tell you never read the comments, but sounds like you already know that. But I mean, has there been that moment in your life where somebody really pushed on it big time, where you personally felt like attacked and you had to stand firm, not only standing firm, but being confident in it?
That's a good question. When I was a missionary, I remember, we knock a lot of doors, right? And I remember knocking on a guy's door. He opened it and we went in to teach him, and he took us into like his library, right? And he turns out to be this Catholic theologian, right? He has this degree in theology and just shreds us, just picks us apart. I mean, of course, you always hope for, the Holy Spirit to guide your conversation and whatnot. But at the same time, missionaries are, 19-year-old kids. And of course, we have a lot to learn still. And sometimes if you aren't too familiar with your faith, then the Spirit can't necessarily bring up many tools for you to work with. He really just picked us apart. And it was kind of the first time I remember him just straight looking us in the eye saying, Joseph Smith was a false prophet and your religion is a lie and it's not true. And, this and that. And that one, that was a little, I wouldn't say necessarily like shaking, but it was the first time I remember where I had to kind of make a decision of how I was going to respond to that. And it didn't change my belief, but it did inspire me to research more and to be a little bit more familiar with my beliefs before something like that happened again. We offered him a Book of Mormon. He, of course, didn't want it. Strangely enough, a week or two later, we were proselyting outside of a grocery store, which I don't think we were probably allowed to do. I think we got kicked off a little bit after that. But he came out of the grocery store as we were out there and he approached us and he actually apologized for how he treated us and asked for a Book of Mormon. And of course we gave it to him. We didn't see him again after that. So who knows what happened. I don't expect he, converted to our faith or anything, which is totally fine. But it was nice to be able to kind of get some resolve that situation in a way. But yeah, that in answer to your question, that was kind of the first time that I had to make that decision. And I expect it has kind of formed where I'm at in my faith today.
Well, I just know, again, I grew up in an evangelical church. And so, a Missionary Alliance church, which, when I would tell people at school, especially high school, oh yeah, I go to the Christian Missionary Alliance church, they would undoubtedly say, oh, you're Mormon. I'm like, why? Because it has the word missionary in it. Like, there are other missionaries, by the way, friends, just saying. But in that, like, we would get reports from people in other countries, missionaries, who would write back and say, hey, we're seeing this persecution. Hey, one guy in particular who's in Papua New Guinea, he was in prison for a while. Our church gave money to his, legal efforts to get him out of prison because he'd gotten put in prison because he was sharing Jesus openly. Mm-hmm. And so I guess they didn't like that. And so they threw him in jail. So, and of course there was a guy in Idaho that was in, Iran for a long time. So I just was wondering,
Yeah. I'm sure it happens in every religion. We had rocks thrown at us and every missionary's got kind of a story like that. I feel like where people really push back on them.
Yeah. It's tough work door knocking. Like I've done it in sales. I can't even imagine like trying to do it from a faith standpoint. And I remember too, just another little small missionary story. We had an African children's choir come to our church when I was going to this Missionary Alliance church. And so we were going around the neighborhood inviting people to this multicultural, concert that these kids were going to put on. And so some of the kids went with us, and I was like, I was in youth ministry at the time, and I was like, this is not a good idea. Not a good idea, especially in Southern Oregon. We're a little racist at times. And so seeing a little, African-American person come to the door was like, we got probably more doors slammed. Well, maybe not. You probably had a few more than we did. I don't know, but we had a few. So, you talk about Christianity, and you talk about your friends growing up in Hermiston that were Christians, and they would kind of push on you a little bit. We kind of talked about that in your mind and in your studies. And here's this word again, this belief word. Do you believe Mormons and Christians are the same? Like, we believe the same thing?
That's I mean, obviously not. Otherwise, we'd all be members of the same church, right? And but I think we have more in common than sometimes maybe either of us would like to admit. I really would hope that we would kind of work together to spread the message of Jesus, right? I feel like the common factor is Jesus. And I know that a lot of Christians have the opinion that we worship a different Jesus or a non-biblical Jesus. There'd probably be some Latter-day Saints that might agree with the idea that our Jesus is a little different because we believe that he did things that are not found in the Bible, right? We believe he visited the Americas. And so if you want to say, oh, that makes him a different Jesus, that's okay. But we believe that he was the Son of God. We believe he was he was perfect. He preached his gospel in the New Testament. He performed miracles. He suffered for our sins so that we could return to live with him. So I think that there are really, when it comes to the really important stuff, we're really quite similar, and we have a lot we can build off of together.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that too is I've heard Mormons say Latter-day Saints. Again, are they interchangeable, by the way? I feel like they are. Or no?
Latter-day Saints today prefer Latter-day Saints, but you can say Mormons, whatever you prefer.
Okay. I just feel like I keep stepping it, so that's why I wanted to clarify that. So I've had friends that are Mormons say, well, Mormons are Christians. And I was like, wait, no, are you? I don't know. So maybe help me with that. Are Mormons Christians?
I think they are, but really it depends on what your definition of a Christian is. Some definitions are quite broad, and all you have to do to be a Christian is believe that Jesus was your savior, right? And in that sense, of course, we're Christians. Other Christians believe that in order to be Christian, you have to believe in the early Christian creeds from the early church, the Nicene Creed and the Apostles' Creed and things like that. If that's the definition that you're operating under, then no, we wouldn't be Christian because we don't necessarily believe in everything taught in those creeds. So really, it just depends on what perspective you're coming from. Oftentimes, I feel like when someone comes to me and says, oh, you're a Latter-day Saint, you're not a Christian, I feel like that's more just a way for people to other us, if that makes sense. And just to kind of, I don't know, like sometimes people treat us like we want to be included in this, exclusive Christian club. And they're fighting to, keep us out of it because no, this is for, mainstream Christianity, even though within mainstream Christianity, you have all these differences of opinions and doctrines. But Latter-day Saints, they're just too different, right? So they're going to be something else. But again, it just depends on what your perspective is. I'm happy to call myself a Christian. If you don't think I'm a Christian, that's totally fine. And from your perspective, I can respect that.
Well, just to be clear, I'm not.
That was a general you.
Okay, fair enough. I just want to be clear for those that are listening that know me personally. Like I'm not touching that one.
You don't have a stake in that one.
I don't have a dog in that fight. Nope. Nope. It's not my job to tell David if he's a Christian or if he's not a Christian. Now, there were those that would say, does David believe Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one can get to the Father except through him being Jesus? Mm-hmm. If he believes that, then in my mind, in all accounts, That makes you a disciple. And there's where I would say, if I was going to push on that word Christian, people may not know this. I say it all the time, but maybe it bears repeating. The word Christian only appears 3 times in the Bible. The word disciple appears way more than 3 times. So I like to consider myself a disciple of Jesus.
Interesting.
I rarely like to use the word Christian. In fact, if somebody comes to me and says, hey, are you a Christian? I usually say no.
Interesting.
Like, what? They're like, what? I thought you were. And I was like, no, I am a disciple of Jesus. And they're like, isn't that the same thing? I'm like, no, let me tell you how it's not. And then boom, door open, right? So anyway.
That's interesting. And in answer to your question, absolutely, yes, we do believe that Christ is, the way, the truth, and the life, or whatever descriptors you used.
Yeah. Well, that was what Jesus said. So anyway, what has been your biggest struggle with being a Latter-day Saint? You personally.
Oh boy, me personally. It's a lot of work.
Help me with that, because when I think of work, I think of like manual labor. So, or like my job. Okay.
Well, sometimes it is manual
but help me with that.
But there's a lot of commitment involved. And so I guess in a way that my biggest struggle doesn't necessarily have to do with its truth claims or anything like that, but rather that it's really a hard thing sometimes to be a Latter-day Saint, because in each ward or congregation, I guess you could say, if you're unfamiliar with ward, you have, most people have a calling, which is, it's kind of a weird word for it maybe, but an assignment, and you're not paid for that assignment, but the leader of the congregation kind of gives you a volunteer job to do, which you can reject if you want to, but it's a good thing to accept them if you want to be part of that, community, right? Not that you'll get kicked out if you don't, but so there's responsibility there. Like I have been a nursery leader, which is while the parents go to their classes on Sunday, I'm taking care of their little kids, which was fun, but it's really hard. And then you've got kind of a ministering assignment, which is so in each ward, we try and kind of pair people up in a way that everybody has kind of a support system, right? So if, John Doe needs somebody to help move, if he's moving to a new house, he can call his ministering brother or whatever you want to call it in the ward who will come help him out, So there's a lot of commitment, a lot of sacrifice, and that's something that I, would expect from discipleship, And I feel like that's something that Christ expected from his disciples in the Bible. So it's not necessarily, I think some people kind of look at it as like, oh, you make them really committed as a way to control them and brainwash them and whatnot, which you could say you could say that about Christ in the New Testament if you really wanted to go that route. But it's simply sometimes a lot of work. And I've only mentioned a couple of things, but there are a lot of other things I could mention. I mean, speaking in church, public speaking is a scary thing, but sometimes you're asked to prepare a spiritual thought and share that in front of the congregation. And, that can get you sweating.
How does your word, I'm trying to say that right. Ward. Why can't I say it? It's an easy word. Ward feel about you and what you're doing on Facebook and YouTube? How do they feel about that?
So I probably don't have a great answer for that, because with COVID, most wards have been operating online. And my wife and I, we just had a baby.
Congratulations.
So to keep,
that's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we've, if we participate in our ward lately because of COVID, we've been doing it online, and we just moved as well. So we really haven't even met many people from our ward, though they've been really kind. And when they found out that we had a baby, even though we've never actually physically been to the congregation, again, because of COVID, when they found out we had a baby, they still organized, meals for us, and they would drop food off, even though they've never even met us. And that's a wonderful thing. But again, that's also part of the work, right? And service and helping people out and loving your neighbor. But anyway, so in answer to your question, I don't think they even know what I do.
They don't know the celebrity that is in
okay
their midst. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, if they don't know, who I am, then I might not have that celebrity status quite yet, which is fine by me.
Awesome. No, I'm serious. Like I love what you're saying. I really do. I love your heart. I love your heart for the people. And I'm hearing that coming out, and that always that just warms my heart. I'm just being truthful there. So, do you feel at all you're stuck? You're in a cult. You just can't get out of Mormonism. If you said one day, "Hey, I want to be done. I can go." You're not stuck in Mormonism, right? You're in a safe place. Blink twice if you're not in a safe place.
I think that no matter which religion you're a part of, there's always pressure to stay there, right? So I'm not gonna. I think it would be disingenuous to say like, "Oh no, I have no pressure at all to I can do whatever I want." I can do whatever I want, and if I did truly feel that I wasn't being honest with myself or my beliefs, then that's something that I'd need to grapple with. But I do feel, again, content where I'm at. And I think as Latter-day Saints, and maybe this is something that can be extended to all of Christians or religions, we like to have all the answers, right? And I'm at a place right now with my faith where I'm okay with not having all the answers. We believe that kind of this restoration, if you're familiar with that term in the context of our faith, it's ongoing, right? And in our articles of faith, we talk about great things that God has yet to reveal, which kind of implies that we don't have all the answers right now. And speculating about them really kind of gets us into trouble more often than not. So I like to leave room for ambiguity. And I think that pairs really well with my I believe testimony versus an I know testimony. And I'm okay with, people asking questions and saying, you know what, I don't know the answer. But there are multiple things that I kind of consider anchors that really keep me harnessed in the faith that I'm in. And I'd be happy to share some of those things with you if you want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have one more question. Well, two more questions for you. So yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah, sorry. What are those?
No problem. So I think when it comes to knowing truth, there's always kind of a spiritual side, right? And an intellectual side. Intellectually, I have a really hard time coming up with any kind of logical way that Joseph Smith could have made up the Book of Mormon and had the effect that it has. So from an intellectual side, that is the Book of Mormon. Again, we refer to that as the keystone of our religion. If the Book of Mormon goes away, everything else kind of comes crumbling down. And I feel pretty confident in putting a lot of our eggs in that basket because the Book of Mormon to me is really a strong book when you actually read it and understand the complexity of it and the history of its translation and the witnesses and whatnot. On top of that is the spiritual side and the spiritual witness of its truthfulness, personally for me. So that's one anchor. Another one is just when you get past the minutia and the controversy and the rumor and the misconception, there are some really beautiful things that Latter-day Saints believe. One of those things is that brings me personally a lot of peace is, so while we're a very missionary oriented people, I feel like more than, almost any other religion I've heard of, we're uniquely positioned to be totally chill with people not joining our faith. Because at the end of the day, we still believe that they're going to end up in heaven. Now, a little backstory to that doctrinal background, I guess, Latter-day Saints believe that that hell is kind of multi-tiered, right? We've got the celestial kingdom, the terrestrial kingdom, and the telestial kingdom. And it's kind of a good, better, best scenario, right? Depending on how you live in this life and, your obedience to commandments and all these different things. But anyways, and that gets into grace versus works, which we're a grace-oriented church, but that's another story. But we believe that pretty much everyone is going to end up in one of those tiers of heaven, right? I feel like most other faiths believe that it's either heaven or hell, right? Like if you don't accept Jesus, you're going to hell for eternity where you will suffer torture and whatever. And in my mind, that eliminates, 2/3 of God's children, right? Like, to me, that doesn't necessarily sound like a plan of salvation. It sounds like a plan of damnation. And I don't want this to sound pointed at your faith. I'm not sure what you believe surrounding these ideas, but in general, the idea that God has more than two options for people, because I feel like people are, there's always a spectrum, right? Like, it's hard to categorize people into two groups. So the doctrine that God's grace is so big that there's room for people, that there's room for basically everyone in heaven. Again, not participating in the same degree of heaven, but it's comforting to me to believe that really everyone has a chance, no matter what your beliefs are. Virtually everyone has a chance to be happy after this life, and to some degree participate and be ministered. I guess ministered to would probably be the appropriate term. Be ministered to by a member of the Godhead, whether that's the Holy Spirit or Jesus Christ or God the Father. To me, that idea, and I probably haven't explained it as well as I could have, it's something that I talk about pretty frequently on our show, but that idea really covers a lot of the controversy. So a lot of people will say, oh, Joseph Smith this or Brigham Young that. And I say, okay, yes, those are challenging topics, but this doctrine is so beautiful and something that I am so staunchly behind that I'm not so much worried about, these details from, church history or whatnot. Does that make sense?
I followed you on all of it, and I think you did a great job. Again, you are a very good speaker. You're very talented at that. I'm sure people have told you that. I hope, right? At least your wife.
It's easier reading from a script. But.
Fair enough. So no, I think you did a great job. Great job articulating that. Yeah. So here's my question. And I have this question, then I want to follow with just one more. So my one question is this. So if you were going to sit down somehow and have a meal with either Jesus, like this is your one moment. You only got one. You got one moment on this. You got Jesus, you got Joseph Smith, you got Brigham Young. Which one are you going to want to go sit with and really, really carry their words of whatever they're going to share with you with the most authority, if that makes sense?
Oh, absolutely Jesus.
Why?
No question. Because he's God, right? I mean, he's perfect. And any question that I might have for Joseph Smith or Brigham Young could be answered by Jesus. Again, Jesus is, the light, the life, the truth, the word. Brigham Young and Joseph Smith were prophets. I respect them. And I surely have plenty of questions for them. But of course, if I have the chance to be with Jesus, sit down, have a conversation with him, no contest.
Yeah, because I've always wondered about that. We play a game at the end of our show, which you'll get to be a part of momentarily. But one of the questions I ask often in this game that we call Senseless is, we have 5 senses and then 6th is the wild card. And the 6th question is, hey, you get to have a dinner or a meal with anyone in history, who would it be and why? And I got asked that actually in one of our care groups, which sounds kind of like similar to your ward. In our church, we have care groups, smaller kind of intimate groups that help. If you need to move, if you need somebody to babysit your kid, if you need, they're there to help support you, so the whole church doesn't have to, worry about your dog dying and, sitting with you if that was a big deal, which for some people it may be. Any event. So I got asked this at a home group one time, like, hey, who would you have dinner with, dead or alive? And I was like, that question was so thought-provoking to me. I'm like, there's so many people. But I was curious and that's part of the reason why I wanted to ask you this, is because to me, I thought about it. And when I was going through my Mormon, I guess you could say, exploring of Mormonism, I got asked that question and I said, Joseph Smith. And somebody was like, why would you even say his name? I'm like, well, I'm fascinated by the man. Like I'm being like pinky promise. We're on a Zoom, so you can see my pinky, but I pinky promise you, like I am so enamored with him to the point where, like, if I could interview him somehow on my podcast, like I would email him every day.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I'm so blown away again by letting him for once and for all in modern day, if you will, modern day technology, set the record straight of who he is. Sure. Because I think he's such a polarizing, and forgive me if that sounds disrespectful, but a polarizing figure that either A, has been misrepresentative, B, we were right on the money with him, or C, none of it's true. Right? I don't know. Maybe the 1 and 3 are the same. I don't know. But that's why I was wondering about that.
And I think that I think there's more nuance to it than that. I think sometimes the criticisms might be true. Sometimes they're totally false. And sometimes it's a mixture and more context is needed. But yeah, I think that, of course, interviewing Brigham Young or Joseph Smith would be absolutely fascinating, jump on every opportunity to do that. But I think that oftentimes in looking from the outside into our faith, the impression is that prophets are emphasized more than Jesus, which is definitely a misconception. While prophets are important to us and they're kind of maybe more unique to our faith, which is maybe why they're highlighted more, whereas Christ is kind of a commonality. So maybe he gets kind of swept under the rug. I don't know. But we want to be totally clear that we are very Christ-oriented. And I'm not just saying this to like fit in with that Christian club, right? Like we are Christ-oriented.
I'll send you a membership card. It's in the mail. It's like, it might look like Costco, but it's in the mail, I promise.
Thank you. I think it's fair to call Joseph Smith polarizing. He is. And even in his history found in our scriptures in the Pearl of Great Price, where he talks about his life, he talks about being told by a heavenly messenger. I don't remember if it's an angel or if it's Christ or whoever, but he's told that your name is going to be had for good and evil among all people, among the whole world. And it is. So I totally am on board with calling him a polarizing figure. I come to a different conclusion on his motives and his, I guess, calling than many others would. But again, I'm very happy to be able to say we can disagree on that. And I still think you're going to heaven, man. That's awesome. And you're going to be happy.
I hope so. Hopefully there's lots of shoes up there. So last question is this. So back in the day, back when I really followed basketball, probably more so than I do now, there was this little arena, maybe you've heard of it, out in Salt Lake City. It was called the Delta Center. It has a new name now. It's fine. But you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. You've heard of that place? All right. So by the way, the seating capacity in that arena is 18,300 people. I don't know if you knew that.
Okay.
So imagine just for a second, you're center court at a Jazz game. You got all people, all walks of life, young, old, male, female, Asian, whoever, every nationality is there. This is your moment. I'm going to hand you the microphone. What would you say after you probably maybe relieved yourself backstage because you're so nervous about being in front of 18,300 people, right? Yeah. And tried not to vomit, perhaps, I don't know. But I hand you the microphone. What would you say to them about you and just you? And again, it's your moment. Whatever you want to say to them, what would you say?
Oh my gosh. Well, this is a horrible situation to be giving an impromptu speech in. You've really set the stage here. I'd probably say something along the lines of, look, you guys, all of you, me, we're all God's children, right? He loves you. If he loves you, no matter what circumstances you're in, I can love you no matter what circumstances you're in. We come from many different walks of life, but I think God planned on that, you know? And there's a great scripture actually from the Quran, which I might quote. I can't quote it perfectly now because I don't have it in front of me, but it says, in essence, there's diversity on purpose. There's diversity of thought. There's diversity of ideas on purpose. And we're going to disagree in this life, but just do the best you can. And we're going to work a lot of things out after this life and we're going to be okay. You know, I'd say I'm a member and a believing member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I invite you to maybe look past the noise about it and to maybe just open your heart, even if not necessarily just to convert, but to just understand, right? To put yourself in our shoes and look past the things that are said about us to what we really believe and come to your own conclusions about it, right? But at the very least, I mean, love your neighbor, right? Love your neighbor and do the best you can, do good things. Let's be unified. Just because I'm a Latter-day Saint and you're an evangelical and you're a Buddhist and you're an atheist, so that doesn't mean we can't get along. It doesn't mean we have to fight. I mean, it doesn't, the Lord said, love thy enemies. And I don't even consider you my enemies, right? We're all brothers and sisters here. We don't have to fight about these things. Let's find the things that we do have, that we do agree on. Let's expound on those and celebrate those things that we disagree on. Let's be respectful about it as we dialogue about it. Ultimately, we're talking about things that science can't necessarily come to perfect conclusions on. And so I think it's really important for everyone to give everyone else the benefit of the doubt, right? Like you, Neil, I believe that you're making the best spiritual decisions you can in your circumstances. I'm not thinking here, oh my gosh, this poor lost soul that hasn't found, the truthfulness of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints yet. I'm thinking you're doing, the best you can. And I don't want that to sound condescending. I'm sure you're making great decisions. I'm sure that God is guiding you. Just because I believe that we have, the restored gospel doesn't at all believe that I think that we have a monopoly on truth. I love learning truth from other faiths. And I think sometimes we Latter-day Saints get so caught up in our own traditions that we forget that we have a lot to learn from evangelicals and from other Christians in general. I think that's something that we need to remember. And that would probably be my takeaway or my message to those people. Is that inspiring enough?
I think so. I'm inspired already, especially since you said that, I'm doing good things. I like that. That was good.
I think you're doing great things.
Thanks you. I appreciate that. Hey, so if people are hearing you right now, right, and they're like, man, I don't want to be, I want to be part of that conversation. I want to know more about Mormon faith. Maybe this conversation today is a launching point or launching pad for somebody to really dig more into if Mormonism is right for them or if it's not right for them, or just have always had questions that maybe we didn't get a chance to cover. Because we could probably go all day in my
definitely
thinking. We probably could, but we can't. So how can people reach out to you? Would you be a great resource for them to go to learn more?
So what I would say, I probably should have said this at the beginning of the episode, but I don't consider myself a scholar or a theologian. I consider myself a normal Latter-day Saint who maybe just reads a little bit more than other Latter-day Saints. I don't know, but I don't have a special degree in ancient scripture or whatnot. So I may or may not be a good resource for you, but if I'm not a good resource, if I can't answer your questions, I'd be happy to direct you to maybe some resources that could. So I'd be happy if anybody wanted to get in contact with me. I recently did finally bring myself to start a public figure Facebook page, which is so cringy for me because it's just like, I have a hard time with that. I don't want to appear like, oh my gosh, I'm this celebrity and I want you all to come and join my page and give me all this affirmation. But I mainly created it largely because I get friend requests from people that, and I don't generally accept friend requests from people I've never met, which is probably a good rule of thumb when it comes to social media. But so I created that page so people could reach out to me if they have questions. We also have, I speak kind of for myself. I don't necessarily represent the views of Saints Unscripted in general or the other hosts of Saints Unscripted. But we do have, you could reach out to our channel on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, or you could subscribe to our channels there and check out what kind of content we have. But yeah, we are totally happy to connect with anybody that is curious. I won't pressure you to convert to our faith. So don't freak out about that. Again, I think you're going to heaven anyways. So anything I can do to help is great.
I think you're going to heaven anyway.
Gonna get that on my living room wall in vinyl lettering.
You should just put it on that wall behind you. David, I want to say thank you. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for your candor today. Thank you for indulging me in my craziness, my wackiness, my hopefully thought-provoking questions. I really, as I said from the onset prior to us recording, I really wanted to come at it from a mindset and a standpoint of understanding and really gaining your perspective. And I absolutely believe you did that today. So I want to play our game with us, and then I'll close with just one final thought. So here is, I don't know if you're a basketball fan or not. We didn't really ever establish that, but there is my beloved team of choice, the University of North Carolina. So you were in Provo, at least close to it, and I'm in Oregon. And here is your die roll that I rolled for you. As you can see there, it is a number what?
4.
All right, awesome. So what is a sound or noise that you love to hear? Sound or noise you love to hear?
Oh boy. A sound or noise that I love to hear. A sound or noise that I love to hear. One more serious one and kind of a funny one. Is that okay?
That's totally fine.
I'm going to start with the serious one. I really like, so again, we have a new baby, right? It's our first one. And so
that's even better. Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. I like to hear the sound of when he's drinking his bottle, and he's just very calm and serene, and just, you can tell he's totally content, but you just kind of hear those little sucking noises, and he's just kind of cooing, as you can tell he's just in his happy place, just filling his little belly, because that's kind of all he's worried about at this point. That is a sound that I like to hear because I think it represents a larger scene, which I am really content with. So that's one answer. Hopefully that doesn't sound creepy, but there it is. The other one, I don't know if you're familiar with the TV show 24, but in between each commercial, it has like the famous Law and Order noise, like dun dun, that everybody tries to reenact terribly. The TV show 24, which isn't on anymore, but in between commercials, it always had a little tone of, as the clock would tick second by second, ding, 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 ding. I love that. I love that sound just because I love that show, and it always made me so excited for what was going to happen after the commercial and whatnot. But I never thought that this interview would end with talking about the tone from the TV show 24, but you put me on the spot, and that's the first thing that came to mind. So there it is.
Here it is. You got to know this about me. I just love knowing stuff about people. I just love getting to know people. I love to know the nuances. I love to know the why of life. And I think you've definitely provided that. So, guys, I just want to challenge you on this today, guys and gals alike. If you are hearing this and you're like, you know what? I have always heard this or always thought this about somebody. I know in episodes past, we've talked about, how we see people. We've talked about, perseverance, how we've had to persevere stuff. But now I'm just wondering, the shoes that you're wearing currently, are you sitting right now in shoes that fit you in a shoes of judgment? Because let me tell you, I know myself, and I can only speak for myself. I have been in seats and shoes of judgment towards the Mormon people, that they've deceived, they've tricked, they've manipulated, they've coerced, they've whatever. And here's the thing that I would say, maybe they have, maybe, who knows? But what I would say to this is I sat next to a human being today and had a conversation. And to me, those are the shoes I'm going to put on and wear each and every day for the rest of my life, as far as I can do it. And I would hope you would follow me in that. Follow me in this standpoint of really getting so intimate with somebody and so comfortable that they're willing to share their favorite noise that involves their son, their newborn son. And what a feeling that must be, that you can have that much trust with somebody. So let me be just a little more bold here and say, I challenge you to do that this week. And in fact, if you do that, I would love to know about it. You can reach out to us, of course, on the website, opspodcast.com. There's a little page that says connect. Let me know. Put it in the box. Drop me a voicemail, whichever's easiest for you. But I would love to know that you took this challenge seriously of really going out and really spending those intimate moments with somebody this week. Walk in those shoes. Don't be stuck anymore. So let that be your challenge today. And just remember, guys, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Join us right back here next week when we again walk in other people's shoes.